to the Thursday, February 19th, 2026 Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting. My name is Sean Murphy, and I am the PHB Chair. I would like to welcome everyone. And if you would like to do a public comment, please make sure to sign up in the chat section. And as we get started, I would like to do introductions from board members so that I can take attendance and who's here today. All right, and so I will start in the room, and we'll start with you, Matthias.
Matthias Smith, Vice Chair on Homelessness and Youth Representative.
Hello, Jack Boyson, SVDP, non-voting member.
Amanda Borda, Lane County Continuum of Care staff.
Carly Walker, Lane County staff.
Diane Aldridge, Lane County staff.
All right, and then we are going to go online, and I see Alexa.
Yes, Alexa Benson, Veneta City Council.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Brianna? Sorry. I'm sorry. Whenever we do the thing up front, I'm always squinting. I really need to go to the optometrist. And Genevieve?
Hi, Jen Chalk, rurally serving elected officials with the Upper Willamette Soil and Water Conservation District.
All right, great. Glad you can make it. Oh, now they're moving around. That's Karen. Kim?
Hi, everyone. Kim Lax, Executive Director for Hope and Safety Alliance, voting member.
Thank you. James, can you help me out? Otherwise, it's going to take 10 minutes. Wakan, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Wakana Alferez, Homes for Good, non-voting member.
Sheila?
Good afternoon. Sheila Wagner, Oregon Department of Human Services, non-voting member.
That's everyone.
Okay. Did we miss anyone? Okay. On the agenda today, we've got public comment, and then we'll do the consent agenda, membership update, a NOFA update, the homeless prevention standards, and HMIS cost sharing policy, community needs assessment update, and the CHIP, and the committee updates. All right. And with that, shall we move to public comment? Okay. Hi, Karen.
Hello. You ready for me?
Go right ahead.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Murphy and PHB members. My name is Karen Sachs, and I'm with Dev Northwest. I appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective on the process surrounding the proposed HMIS cost-sharing policy. Dev Northwest develops, owns, and operates affordable housing throughout our 6-county footprint, but our roots are here in Lane County. In 2024, we opened the second phase of development at our Polk Street apartments, specifically designed for transition-aged youth. The project was partially supported by permanent supportive housing funding for its development and ongoing resident services from the Oregon Legislature via Oregon Housing and Community Services. As required by OHCS, we receive referrals into those units from HMIS. In February of 2025, our team received a heads up from Lane County that there was consideration of an HMIS cost-sharing policy. Fast forward 11 months, last month we received notification of a proposed yearly fee. From our perspective, both the proposal of a cost-sharing policy, but more importantly, the process itself poses concerns. The process has been incredibly opaque. We do not know what, if any, financial hole the county is trying to fill with this policy. We have not been told specifically what additional capacity needs or expenses are being incurred with these projects, or what, if any, steps were taken to mitigate that from the county. We have not had a chance to learn about how each of the multiple line items in the COC application that are tied to HMIS are or are not covering the costs. And ultimately, we were not provided with the space for thoughtful, robust partner conversation with the goal of co-creating solutions. Instead, an email with a proposed fee was sent to us. And yes, there is a waiver for the first year, which we appreciate, but no indication on if or how the funding amount will be reevaluated in future years. Our current amount is predicated on the previous year, our primary year of lease up, which inevitably has more demands than any future year for a PSH project. Our goal is permanent housing, not time limited, not transitional. We operate similar projects throughout our service area, partnering with multiple entities that backbone the HMIS and fund that work through the COC. Not one has indicated that any need to shift costs to partner agencies. For us, the challenge remains that we were not considered a partner in this process. We were not provided space to come together, to analyze the need, explore solutions, and share our experience and our financial reality in operating these programs. We recognize that funding is tight across the board. We're all feeling it. We're trying to do more with less at every turn, scaling back and down and figuring out how to navigate through this new reality. Should the cost-sharing policy be adopted at today's meeting, we would respectfully request that there is direction to engage with partners more fully on this throughout the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Chris? Oh, she said we only had the one person for public comment online, correct? Yes, yeah.
So where do I go?
So,
That's a good question. I think anywhere.
is that one? I think that one might be on.
On. Test 1, 2. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. My name is Chris McAllister, and I've had the honor to live and be born in this county. For the majority of my life, I have been either homeless or experienced homelessness, and that gave me a skill set we often call lived experience, and so I call it character building. But that said, I just wanted to use this moment to share as both someone who has represented some of the hardest times in my life while on the streets in services that some of the people in this room helped keep me alive. Some of the people who've known me since I was a youth and have helped keep building on positive and creative ways to engage and have it not just be one person's reality, but multiple people's solutions. I also want to just thank Amanda Borda for helping bring an advisory committee such as League forward after we, the body, created it. I'm very proud of that acronym, the Lived Experience Advisory Group for Unhoused Engagement, here all week. That said, we've been able to explore a lot of diverse needs across multiple jurisdictions, but there comes a cost to people who do share their personal trauma and their personal experiences. And this goes beyond just the people who receive services, but also those who provide them. We as a community need to make sure that we uplift all of the people living through the experiences of sometimes serving under executive order, federal order, or the removal of federal protections, folks without the meds, without the services they need. And then we often find that there is silence when our people are blamed for bigger social ills. Unhoused people did not create homelessness. Unhoused people did not create drug use. Unhoused people did not create no place for them to heal after they had a surgery and lost their home. This goes with the same providers who put all of their efforts in to make sure that our community cannot leave anybody behind. And so I just would like to implore anybody with lived experience, whether you are a vendor or whether you are a person suffering or having suffered homelessness or experienced one of your close ones suffering homelessness, to ask questions. These bodies are here to put your truth into action, and if it doesn't work, to be able to help work it out. And I would just like to just summarize that we are an example in this nation and in this world. Some of our ideas from this body have echoed all the way through to Canberra, Australia, to Poland, because they see us, they hear us, it gets translated, and YouTube is a beautiful thing. Some of the decisions from lived experience will not always be supported by the government institutions. However, some of them will, and sometimes it just takes voicing why it means something to you. lived experience brought transparency to these meetings, which is why we have the honor to be able to see our people here online, as well as be able to have the committee members understand that this is not behind an opaque situation, but is more transparent than almost any other government agency like what we do. So I just want to say thank you for allowing there to be more lived experience, but I also ask as an advisory committee that you take care of your advisory people, you take care of your lived experience, because when things go bad or when things are accepted and they're not acted the way that the lived experience people felt it could, we bear a bigger burden. We bear sometimes survivor guilt, and we bear the need to implore more, and sometimes it can affect our mental health. So I appreciate you allowing me to come here as a representative of this board for a long time. I am proud of the work that we do, and I will probably see y'all in a little bit. Thank you.
Hey, Chris. And you will see us in a little bit. As a matter of fact, you just could have sat there if you wanted, because you'll be back up in about 10 minutes or less. All right. Anyone else for public comment? No? Okay. All right, thanks. So now to approve the consent agenda, which include the minutes from the December 18th all-member meeting, the January minutes from the special all-member meeting, and the January 2026 Statement of Revenue and Expenditures in the financial dashboard. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Matthias. All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion? Okay. I'm taking the quietness for note. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, and we are now up to the membership update. See, I told you. So we are going to take a moment to do acknowledgements. One is for Chris. Got it? Just a moment, there's a little echo.
Yeah, it's mine. I'm sorry.
For Chris McAllister. Chris has been a member since 2026. He served as a PHB co-chair as well. He was pivotal in the creation of League and ensuring the voices of lived experience were present on the board. He diligently still engages with stakeholders, but particularly in strengthening the Egan warming shelter capacity and supports, and was instrumental in saving lives during the ice storm of January 2024 in Eugene and Springfield and Cottage Grove. This is an acknowledgement for all of us for all the work that you have done and your advocacy for individuals with lived experience and your curiosity and your questioning. So I just want to say I have admired your bravery and just to throw it all out there to say, this is what it is. I want to learn more, and to take that information. And as you said before, what we can't build in the government as of yet, you don't stop. And you go out in the community and you have found a way to work with others to make things happen. And I think that is a foundational component of how you change the whole entire structure, because sometimes it takes the individuals who are willing to step out on the limb to do things that other people thought were not possible or could not yield the results. And then you're able to bring along those folks as you see and show that, yes, this is possible and that this has been successful. And that's one of the things that I have admired about you the whole time I've known you on the PHB. is if I think it can happen and people with lived experience can happen, I'll show the naysayers it can happen. And I think that's why things end up on YouTube sometimes. So I want to appreciate you. And I see Mayor Knutson has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Very appreciated, and thank you for those words. And Chris, I just wanted to say in my official capacity as mayor, but also in speaking for our community, to express my appreciation for 10 years of service with this board. From 2016 until 2026, you have been present and dedicated, determined, and also focused on solutions and finding ways to work with people and improve life experiences and opportunities for people across our community. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for the fact that even in your encouragement to others as you are stepping off of your term of engagement with the Poverty and Homelessness Board, so much of what you are saying is so representative of the contributions that you have made to this community. And I think it does take time to work for lasting change, but as you're describing the international influence and the ways in which work here has been an example to others, that comes through the determination and the dedication of our community continuing to show up and work towards solutions. And those are beneficial to us locally, and when they work well, they are great examples to others. So I just wanted to thank you for these 10 years of work in our community and service, and for the work and engagement also beyond, because there are so many ways to be a force for good in the world. And I appreciate you and all of that you've dedicated to Poverty and Homelessness Board. So thank you.
Commissioner Farr?
You know, Chris, there are a lot of things I could say to you about you. Most of the things I'd rather say when you weren't here, because you get embarrassed when people talk directly to your face and point out the things that you have done. You don't like it, and you got to live with it for a minute. I'm sorry for that. You know, I remember June 7th, 2016. You sat next to me over at MLK over at the Serbu, and you talked a little bit that day, and I spoke back and forth with you on the side, and I thought, this is a man whose voice needs to be heard. And you did exactly that over the course of the next 10 years. You weren't only heard, you made people uncomfortable with the things that you said sometimes. And the discomfort that you caused created action. And it continues to do exactly that, Chris. Don't worry about making people uncomfortable, because that is how you get things done. I think about some of the things that you and I have done together, and I think one day when you and I and Arwen, Master Spain, sat in my office and talked about all of the things that could happen with Carry It Forward, which at that time was occupying a portion of Arwen's garage. And you were going into tents, taking soiled bedding and soiled clothes, washing them and returning in very dignified fashion the soiled bedding to the original owner, not just trading it, but giving them their stuff back. What a huge impact that had. That's just symbolic of the impact that you've had, Chris, in our community, and that you continue to have. You mentioned survivor guilt. You say you sit here with survivor guilt. It's a term that I understand, and there's nothing I can do to help you with that other than to say that as a survivor, you help others survive more than you can count, more than you even know. There are people who are living today because of your efforts, Chris, and that's an ongoing. So your guilt should be minimized by the fact that you are helping and creating existing ongoing lives for people who otherwise would have much more difficulty meeting the daily challenges. And not just cleaning bedding. You know, Carry It Forward now occupies a pretty large space in the original space where I first met you, Arwen, which was Camp Lane, and you're doing wonderful things there. I'd like to say also that if you look up there, Metro TV is here with us. All of our meetings are filmed. They're rebroadcast. It's being broadcast live right now. Chris, it was his idea. And he looked at me and said, how do we do this? Well, that question caused me to ask that question, and then we put it in the budget for that 1 year. It became regular because of Chris McAllister. We're on TV right now, so smile at the camera. Thank you, Chris. Chris, thanks for the work you have. Thanks for the work you have done. Thanks for the work that you will do, and I'm honored to work alongside of you and often in your shadow. Thank you, Chris.
And Chris, wanted to say a few words as well, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Farr, Mayor Knudsen, and Chair Murphy for those kind words. It doesn't come easy to speak truth to power, and I'm working on my tone. So with that being said, I just want to say that this is the second most honorable work I've ever done. First being a social worker in the extremes, because when you are a social worker in a vacuum, there's only so much that can happen. And so everybody in this group who participates, who asks questions, is a hero, a heroine in my eyes, and deserves the support and the time to speak on this body. The 9 years, the first 4 years of those 9 full years were some of the most amazing years I've ever spent, because we not only started to change the ball here in Lane County, but it rippled all the way up through multiple states. And having had the honor to represent what we have done with our lived experience group, of which over half of my original cohort has passed away. It matters to show the victories, but it also allows us to share with other communities about how can maybe you do it differently. And so I had the opportunity to even go to a national council for the homeless and represent what does effective lived experience engagement look like. And so I have a great example following in my footsteps as a youth who's lived on these streets, and 8 years on the streets of Eugene is not easy, but it is able to be survived with the right kind of people around you, the right type of programming, from Looking Glass to Catholic Community Services to even the scouting movement. Those are all groups that help keep me alive, and so, which allows me to share my voice with y'all. And I will not be a stranger. I will not be leaving this work for another 4 years. I plan on possibly retiring in the next 5. We carry heavy loads on our shoulders, and take advantage of EAPs if you got them. But Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to share this. Please know that this work is not in vain, and with it online, with it engaged in other communities, practiced even in Southern Oregon, some of the things that came from this very table, from voices like every one of you. I would also just like to end with, I want to appreciate the staff that make this happen, from Pearl Wolf, to Reagan Watchus, to James Ewell, to Carly, to Amanda, to Lisa Bravo, to Lisa Craig, to Brianna. The teams are beautiful. Lynn Oliver, Robin Scott. Your names are not forgotten by the people who are here. Alex Dreer, Sarai Johnson. It doesn't end, because you guys keep coming in and you keep building up the change. So please support this group more. Please continue to look at how to expand the voice. And please, please, please be proud of what you're doing. Thank you. Shyness, I'm going to be.
But you also want this, right? I mean, I could take it, but people would be wondering why it's on my office.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And after that lovely statement from Chris, and I've already told Chris, don't be a stranger. So I also want to thank our elected officials who have agreed to be with us another year, and that includes Commissioner Farr and Mayor Knudsen and Mayor Van Gordon. So thank you all very much for continuing to be here with us on this work. And we had a plan that we were going to do a vote today, but we had a little goof because we wanted to send out an email to get feedback if there was others who were interested in filling the chair positions, and we did not get that email out in time. And so what we would like to propose is that we would move this agenda item to the next meeting, and that would give individuals time to think about if they would like to nominate themselves or nominate someone else for the chair positions, and then we will add it to the agenda. I'm seeing some nods there. Okay. All right. We will do that. I do want to let people know, not to put people on the spot, that the 3 chairs have agreed that if you all are like, nope, we don't do it, we will do it, but we would also love if people would like to have an opportunity to serve as chair, that you throw your hat in the ring. It's been a wonderful experience for myself. I'm going to assume that Mateus will say the same thing. So we would be more than delighted to step down if there's other folks who would like to join and have an opportunity. Okay. And then with that, we're going to move to the NOFA with Amanda.
Thank you. I think you have my slides. Okay, hopefully. Thanks. You can go to the next. I just wanted to give an update since we did move some things forward and a lot has happened in very short periods of time. So just want to keep you all up to date on sort of what has happened and what's next in the ongoing saga of the Continuum of Care application. We weren't able to meet sort of the last time we had to make some decisions and move forward. And so I did send out a memo with some of the details, but just wanted to sort of reiterate where we're at, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's coming. So for the fiscal year 25 Continuum of Care funding, that as of this moment will be selected through the revised fiscal year 24-25 2-year NOFO that they sort of re-released in January. And so HUD was, if you'll remember, required to maintain that NOFO based on court order and a current injunction that is in place. So with that, there were no policy changes within that. It was really just edited to update dates and process items. So nothing else substantive changed within that. So most renewals at this moment are being processed as sort of an automatic renewal based on their previous application from fiscal year 24. The only things we had to submit were related to changes. So if projects were reduced or new projects from reallocated funds or projects that had not renewed previously that were eligible, like projects renewing for the first time had to be submitted. So it was really limited what we had to submit, and some COCs didn't have to submit anything if none of that applied. So for our submission, this is what I sent out in the memo. We did have a few changes to submit. So the first one was related to the Alder Host Homes, YHDP, the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program project. That one had already been approved to sort of shift and be replaced to a diversion and kinship project, which will still connect to host homes, but won't be a host homes project under the YHDP funding. And so this allows a little more flexibility in what they can offer. So we submitted that replacement project. We also had 2 projects that were reduced from reallocation, and this was a Lane County decision for a couple of projects. Mackenzie had some significant balances for multiple years. And so we felt like we could shift that money so that it doesn't get lost and it could be better used for other purposes. As well as the Schenkel MLK grant. You'll remember that one ended December 31st. And so the Schenkel 11 scattered site units had already had to end because we didn't have money. We still don't have the award for the current grant period that we're operating. So we were not able to sort of continue funding that without award. So those 11 units had already stopped. So we moved those funds as well. So all of those funds that were available were then put towards a new coordinated entry SSO supportive services project. And that project was submitted last year but not funded. So it was already a project we had in the queue, was already approved by the COC committee for resubmission this year. And so given the timing, that just made the most sense to submit that project. And given the limitations on permanent housing that we're likely to see, it didn't make sense to sort of move it to some other housing project that would then be at risk. So there was no consolidated narrative application of any kind submitted with it. It was just the project application pieces. Next slide. So the other thing that has happened since that time is the appropriations was passed and signed by the president recently. And that included a couple of major items related to the COC program, mainly due to a lot of advocacy that came out from continuums across the country, as well as the National Alliance to End Homelessness. There was a really big push to contact legislators on how we can potentially protect some COC funding within that bill. And so the result of that is that the language included for fiscal year 25 so included that HUD must immediately non-competitively renew projects that expire in Q1, so between January and March of this year, because we still don't have those awards. So they must immediately move forward with renewing those. If HUD does not make their overall awards for that year by April, they then have to move forward with renewing Q2 awards. And then if HUD does not make all awards by July, they must renew all Q3 and Q4 projects. And then for fiscal year 26, it also outlined sort of what funding will be available and secured that at least Tier 1 has to be at least 60% of a COC's current annual renewal demand. So you remember in the previous attempt of a fiscal year 25, they tried to reduce that to 30%. Leaving most projects at risk. And so Congress limited that. So Tier 1 cannot, in the next fiscal year 26 NOFO, be less than 60. And they outlined specifically that HUD must release that NOFO before June 1st to sort of keep on that expected timeline. Next slide. So what is next? The legal process surrounding this NOFO is still ongoing, and so the appropriations language has in some ways impacted that case now because it changes sort of what is being argued and what was being challenged. I will say that there's an update just since yesterday. Before, I'd already made these slides, so I don't have it in here, but yesterday, due to the appropriations language, HUD filed an emergency motion with the court to lift the current injunction. And what they're essentially arguing is that the timeline and the urgency that necessitated that injunction is no longer in play because of that timeline that is outlined in the appropriations gives them direction on when they have to meet award deadlines. And they are also, in that emergency motion, specifically indicating that they would like to re-release the fiscal year 25 NOFO for Q3 and Q4 awards. So they're not moving on from this just yet. We're not totally in the clear. So that's why I say as of now, renewals are moving forward, but they've essentially, it's an emergency motion, so they've asked that the court make either a full summary judgment by March 2nd or remove the injunction before that time. So we will know in the next, couple of weeks how this might move forward, but it's very possible. I don't know what the likelihood is, but it's very possible that, because a lot of the things that were included in the injunction and the reasoning for it is now kind of moot with what is outlined there, that they feel like they can move forward with that. So we'll see what the judge thinks of that. But if that happens, we would have to do a competition. They would release it right away, and we'd have probably 30 days for those projects, which results in a lot of our projects expire by June 30th in Q2, but there are a number that expire in December or in between there. So it would impact some of our projects. So just wanted to let everyone know sort of where that's at. That's fresh as of yesterday. So we don't know what will happen with that, but we'll definitely update by March 2nd on where that lands. Pat, did you have a question now? Do you want
Well, I do. That's big news. So in the last 24 hours. So here's the unfair question. Is there any indication as to expectation? What do we expect the judge to? That's an unfair question.
I think, yeah, we don't, I don't know. You know, I read through it, and I think some of it could be valid just because of the way the arguments were set up, and the way the language included in the bill references a fiscal year 25 NOFO. So they're taking that as direction from Congress on how to move forward. So I don't know what, you know, from a legal standpoint, how likely that is, but I know the National Alliance is already putting stuff out, trying to get COCs to communicate what the harm might be so that they're able to respond, because I think they have to submit a response on the injunction and whether it could still cause harm. So I think they're trying to gather as much of that information as possible to make an argument.
If it could cause harm.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would give us 30 days to go through all the rigors of what should take, how long, 6 months?
We don't know what we don't know what that competition will look like.
Right.
So we don't know.
daunting.
And then as the timeline is laid out for the next fiscal year 26, NOFO, that one would then be also released before June. So that would mean doing, you know, what will then be probably 3+ NOFOs within 6 months. Yeah, so it would be a lot for COCs to handle.
And yet here you are smiling.
Here I am.
Thank you, Amanda.
But I think it's just, it causes a lot of confusion amongst COCs, amongst recipients of COC funds. It's been, as you know, a lot of different communication coming out since November. Things have pivoted, a number of times, and so it just creates more chaos, confusion, and a lot of, folks are saying that's the point, that it just creates a lot of confusion on what will move forward, what will be renewed. It's a lot of uncertainty for everybody, so we're just going to have to take it as it comes. So as we know, many of the proposed policy changes they had are still expected to move forward, whether it be in that fiscal year 25 one or the next one. So we're not sort of out of the clear on that. And I think the messaging is really that the COC should really begin starting to talk about, strategies, priorities for our renewals and new projects, just with the information we have, knowing it might change, but really now that we have that time, because last time we really didn't, having those conversations around what we want to secure, what's important, what's a priority for reallocated funds, and having some of those at least preliminary discussions would be helpful, and how those potential policy changes might be implemented locally as far as service requirements or other limitations like that they've mentioned. And so I want us to also begin planning on the new project development so that we don't have that really quick RFP process, that we can really do that better. So now that we have, maybe a small window, those are things that are, on my mind. Next slide. So I also just wanted to highlight quickly the new projects process, since we're kind of mentioning it. We did have a number of questions come up around that last RFP process, I think because it was so fast, and we had a number of new organizations applying and who aren't normally part of the process, and given just the general confusion around that NOFO. So I just wanted to clarify sort of what that new process looks like, especially for those who might be interested, or so we can consider what we want it to look like. And so currently, the HUD NOFO will outline what the opportunities are for new projects. They outline what project types are eligible, any specific populations to be served. That's all within that NOFO. The funding available is determined based on a bonus amount, which is usually a percentage of our annual renewal demand, as well as any reallocated funding that's existing that we're moving. So the COC committee is responsible for reviewing those options and determining which ones we want to make available to the continuum. So if HUD is saying we can do permanent supportive housing, rapid housing, or coordinated entry, the COC committee can decide, well, we only want to accept proposals for new PSH, because that's our priority. So the COC committee defines that within what HUD has outlined. And so Lane County, based on our policy, confers with St. Vincent de Paul and Homes for Good on potential new projects that they might want to submit. If more than one applicant would like to submit an application, then the COC issues the request for proposal competition process. And/or if projects selected through the RFP are not one of the co-applicants, those typically fall as a subrecipient under Lane County. So each year, the COC committee has these written policies for the COC competition. We post those on our website. They approve them every year based on what's in the NOFO that outline what happens with new projects, renewals, reallocation, et cetera. So should anything want to change within that policy, I would just recommend providing that either to me or to the COC committee for our next revision of the COC competition policies. So if that process isn't happening the way that we want, certainly open to looking into how we can make it better or more transparent. I think there was a lot of complication this year in terms of who was applying. We had the first time of, other Lane County divisions were applying, and there wasn't a lot of time to sort of think through those new scenarios and how it fits in our process. So we just had everyone apply through the same process for fairness. And so I think we're just thinking through, now that we have time, how we can account for those scenarios that we now have in our new process. So any questions about that? I just had received some questions about that process and what it looked like.
Okay. Anyone online have questions? Amanda, I had a couple.
Yeah.
So my first, as the COC committee, do you guys kind of do like a recap, like from this whole process and all the questions? Will you guys have your own recap about what worked, what didn't work, and maybe what popped up this time around your policies?
Yeah, I think we can do that. It typically remains the same every year because it's always been standard, but this year just has thrown so many wrenches in the mix. We normally don't have that much new money available. And so this amount was way more than we typically have. And so I think it just opened a whole lot of questions that we haven't ever had to answer. So I'd like to take that time now to talk through that so that we know what to do in these scenarios and everyone agrees on the process. Yeah.
Great. I figured you would, but I knew this process brought up a whole bunch of stuff where everybody was kind of like, well, what?
And in a
So
very
it's
short
like,
timeline.
I'm assuming they're going to do their own review now that we have we don't know what we don't know until it happens kind of scenario, which it feels like we had this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then my other question was the COC, the SSO project that was approved. Can you just give us a little recap on what that was that's going to be funded?
So that one was, it's primarily to fund coordinated entry staff within the county that are, a lot of is funded with other sources that are now not there. So we have always wanted to apply for a coordinated entry supportive services grant to support those positions. Most COCs have that at this point to support the coordinated entry work since it's required. We've not actually had a COC grant to support that. So we always fund it with general fund and with state funding or other sources. And so that includes those positions that help folks get document ready as they're getting up on the list and connected to permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing programs. Those staff that do all of that work, it would help fund those positions and are just staffing around coordinated entry requirements.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I have one more slide. Or was there another question?
No, go right ahead.
So I just have some questions in here, and I can always share these after the meeting as well, but I would just kind of things that we're thinking about internally, or I am, that I'm bringing up to our team, and things that I think this group and the COC committee, or however you all want to designate it, but things that I think we should start thinking about, given all of the things that we know are coming, right, is how do we want transitional housing to fit in our system? Who should be served by that? Where does it best fit? Given we're probably going to lose other permanent housing, how can we best use that model, and who might it be most effective for? What are our priorities for renewal projects in Tier 1, knowing it's probably going to be 60% now? What are we most interested in securing? And what data can inform these decisions? I've already talked with Carly a bit about what information might be useful to make those determinations, especially around who could be served by transitional housing. So we're looking at that. How does the COC want to incorporate service requirements and start developing those policies so that we can implement that consistently across projects? What does our current system look like for substance use treatment, since that's such a main focus for HUD going forward? And what does that availability look like? Where are there gaps? Much of which, right, we don't have a lot of control over, but how can we build up that partnership and those connections? And where, we've not really done that analysis from our end about what gaps exist for availability. And they're asking about how many beds and 24-hour detox and all of that. So understanding that, I think, a little bit better would help us figure that out. And how are we currently partnering with law enforcement? That's another emphasis. I think just understanding that more clearly about where those formal partnerships are, where it's maybe informal and we just have connection to law enforcement through outreach or other, programs, and where are those opportunities to do that more formally as well, might be helpful in boosting our application next time.
Question, Amanda, are we talking about just law enforcement, or we're talking about the justice system in general?
I'm not sure. I think primarily the language seemed to be focused around law enforcement, especially around unsheltered populations, but I think it could be, taken as, as broadly as we want to.
And the reason I ask that is because here in Lane County, we have sponsors, which if we didn't have sponsors, there'd be a whole heck of a lot more people who are recently discharged from the penal system who enter into house.
So I think, thinking of what do we have and what's formal like that, but then what is also just kind of informally happening with EPD, with the sheriff's office, what kind of informally happens for the homeless population, what does that look like right now, and where are there opportunities to maybe do that better, have cross-training, be on the same page in terms of how we're addressing the issue. I think there's always conversations we can have around that.
And houselessness and the justice system do intersect. That's one of the key areas that we can address is how do we soften that intersection so that houseless people aren't caused to go into the justice system unnecessarily, or that recidivism is something that we help people through eliminating houselessness, help eliminate or reduce recidivism. There's a big discussion surrounding public safety, justice system, and houselessness.
Right. And then the last one is how are faith-based partners involved in our system? That's another emphasis of HUD is building up more faith-based involvement in homeless services. And so I think we do that to an extent, but maybe just having more formal conversations about those partnerships and what that could look like, and where, again, are those opportunities to do more there. So those are just things to think about, and whether that's setting up separate work groups to talk about, separate meetings to talk about, or if those can happen in existing meetings. I think it would be good to start now that we have some small window of time to get ahead of some of those conversations so that we're not having to have them while the competition is open. I think would be helpful.
After Sherry's question, I have another one.
Okay. Sherry?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on my phone, which I don't normally do meetings on my phone, so I was struggling to find the mute button. So I think that this is probably a broader conversation.
Sherry, I think you muted.
Or, no,
Oh, she froze? I wonder if she can. We might, okay. Oh, no, she's back, okay. Oh, now did we lose her?
Maybe switching modes.
Okay.
So,
Nope. She's muted? Not she.
Then I'll forge forward.
Yeah, Commissioner Farr, and Brianna, maybe you can text her and let her know she's muted. Go ahead, Commissioner Farr.
The HUD is suggesting things like more involvement with faith-based organizations. Here locally, again, we are blessed with a lot of different involvements that we've had through the years because we've had a great deal of interest, whether it be faith-based or private aid industry. And I was at a meeting this morning where a former executive from one of our hospitals was talking about how the church that she was a member of used to be challenged to house 8 people for a period of time, and that she wondered what happened to that program. So I'm thinking that there may be things that we can reinvigorate without having to reinvent things. Simple reinvigoration, if there are people out there who already have the interest inside of them to do it, it may just be, not even lighting a match, just blowing on the flame. So.
I agree. Yeah, I think it could just be opening up those conversations and seeing what comes out of that. And I know there's a lot of different pockets of things happening from individual organizations in the community already, but maybe how do we bring that together and understand how that fits in our bigger system, I think would be helpful.
And I'll say that
I am back, so whenever I can have my turn, that would be great.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'll finish later.
Okay, go ahead, Sherry.
I was just going to say, I think this is like a broader discussion than the minute details that I bring up, but I think it's really relevant because there's been some real questions that I've been having lately, especially around the long-term rental assistance program. I'm worried because as our permanent supported housing is drying up and we're going towards that direction, we're putting people in long-term rental assistance that I don't think are going to be successful in that program. And that worries me because they really do need permanent supported housing. And I hate to see them, end up unhoused again. The other thing we were talking about, the treatment beds, like this just happened to me recently, but it's happened a lot, which is that we had a client who went through Buckley and desperately wanted to be an inpatient treatment at the end, but they don't have inpatient treatment. There's no beds available. And so this person ended up back here and ended up using again, because this is not a place where you can be clean here when you've got so many people actively using. And so I think it's really interesting that we're having this discussion, and I think it's really pertinent to what's really going on the ground right now. So I appreciate it.
Just with thank you, Chair, and I'll be quick, just with a tool that I've seen utilized, and we've used it as a poverty and homelessness board in the past, is the summit, where you bring people from different sectors together to bring their information, their knowledge, and leave the summit with marching orders as to what to do next. It can be very effective. Not everybody who comes goes and does, but some people come and they go out and do some significant things that otherwise might not have happened. Each month we have a mental health summit, and where people from different sectors come together and talk about how can we forward mental health, what are the issues, and what can different sectors bring to the table. I'm not saying let's do that tomorrow, but let's put it on, in the toolbox as something that we potentially could do to enlist more people to get more interested in the things that, the changes that we are going to be required to make, some of which are monumental, almost, 180-degree rotation changes. So.
Any other board members have comments? Okay. I just wanted to say about the transitional housing, and as we're looking at this, and I know we've done some work with permanent supportive housing about trying to find the best fit for individuals, and over the years how we've worked that model in where there's flexibility now within PSH to get people in the right model. And I think when we're looking at transitional housing, it might be bringing along and inviting, even if that's a subcommittee, of employment folks, since we know within 2 years with transitional housing, they're going to have a source of income. And that is probably not going to be a Section 8 voucher. And who would be successful in that model. And then also affordable housing providers who might not be connected to the continuum of care, but who would have units where if people were working, it would be affordable for those families or whoever the focus would be able to move into those units. And so we would have that partnership when we're looking at who would most benefit from transitional housing, that we start building and talking about the path out, knowing that whatever that percentage is, that we want to work to try to be as successful as possible, so that, permanent supportive housing, which I think what Sherry was talking about, if people need to go into permanent supportive housing, we would have those beds available in transitional housing. is made, for folks that we have a program to put together and the resources that we would have the best success of them being successful.
Yeah, I guess what it looks like sorry to interrupt. What it looks like on the ground for us is that right now, people that are now getting pulled for long-term rental assistance are the most vulnerable. They have the highest scores as far as front door assessment. I work with these people, I do these assessments, and hopefully we can get them SSI, but SSI is like $900. So trying to find somewhere to live. And it worries me because I know there's not a firm ending date for when someone's supposed to be self-sufficient. But for most of these folks that I'm working with that I'm now seeing going into this, I'm not sure that that is something that is a reality for them to be able to do. And so that just concerns me.
Thanks, Sherry. And then we're going to take the last comment, I think, from Genevieve.
John, just back to what you were saying about how some of the low-income and affordable housing providers are not members of the continuum of care. I know this is a long shot, but I think that when, as a county that is facing a financial crisis, we are giving discounts and tax credits to these builders, that maybe we could ask that there be an obligation that they engage in this work, either by providing some sort of or being part of the referral system or something. And I know that that's kind of a big dream, but I think that if our funding is threatened and we're giving it away, then we should really try to get more from it.
Thank you. All right. And looks like you got some ideas, Amanda. Sorry. You always walk away with more work to do, so I'm just apologizing in advance. All right, and then, wait a minute. Now we're to Brianna. The homeless prevention written standards.
Step down. And I'm going to share another slide. So I'm here presenting on the homelessness prevention written standards, which is an item for voting. Part of the work as Hi, I'm Brianna Rogers. So sorry. Senior Program Services Coordinator with Lane County Housing Community Action. And I'm presenting the Homelessness Prevention Written Standards, which is an item for voting. And part of our goal as the COC and the Community Action Agency is to adopt written standards for different program areas. So the one that I've been focusing on the past couple months since about September, October, is the Homelessness Prevention Written Standards. These were developed by Lane County staff, the homelessness prevention providers, the current providers who are funded this fiscal year. And then it was presented to the league committee as well for review for any feedback that they had. And then edited and drafted, and now before you is hopefully our final draft for approval. What it does is it lays out access points for funding. That's one of the parts that is really confusing in our community, one of the really confusing things. So it lays out identified access points for prevention and rent assistance, which are funded through OHCS via Lane County, knowing there's many other places as well. It localizes the funding basics and eligibility and allowable costs, and so it pulls just the basic information over from the funding manuals that OHCS provides. It standardizes an intake process, the data requirements, the case management, and outcomes, and I think that's the biggest piece here as well. Each funding source has its own parameters on income or eligibility or these little kind of components. This just standardizes that if someone were walking into one agency versus the other, in general, they will be provided the same information and kind of go through the same process or ask the same questions. So really making sure that it's equitable in that way. And then it also provides guidance on common occurrences such as permanent supported housing enrollments and couch surfing or doubled up households as well. So some of the kind of common situations that come up that cause our providers to have questions or uncertainties in how to support those households, it kind of standardizes a way that we really put thought into it in those kind of pieces and in how do we support those households, and again, a standardized way that feels really equitable across the community. This guide does not, what it does not do is it does not replace the OHCS manuals, the SharePoint site for documents that providers use to, they pull documents from that site to standardize their income or processes with the households they're serving. And it also does not replace Lane County TA for anything else that comes up. There are a lot of situations with a lot of households that come up. So it doesn't go over everything in here, but it goes over some in here. So this is what it does. If there's any, I only have the one slide for this one. If there's any questions on it.
Are there any questions? The other two slides are yours too, right?
Okay. Different topic. Yes. The other two slides
Okay.
are for the
Well,
different
then
topics
just
later.
because before we do a vote, I want to make sure that I go to each member and ask them if they have any specific questions. So help my brain. Should I ask them now or wait till you do the other two slides?
Do them now because the other two slides are for the like later agenda item.
Thank you. All right.
Just in case. Carly's gonna go up and manage the tech for a second, just in case I miss anything.
And I'll start at the
I
table.
don't see anything
All
here.
right. Commissioner Farr, any questions,
I'll
concerns?
at the end, please.
No, okay. Mateus? No. Jack? I have none. Okay, I'm going to look at my list really quick. Mayor Knutson? Any questions or concerns before we vote?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, but now it's going to be you, right? Okay. Alexa, any questions or comments, concerns before we vote?
No, thank you.
Or Councilor Benson, apologize. Genevieve?
Just quickly, does the standardization of the questions imply a standardization of the metrics as well, or is it just kind of formalizing the headers of the data?
Might need more.
Like,
on your
would this lead to a greater restriction on people who can access services because of a majority of organizations having a particular income threshold versus one or two agencies that may have a higher or lower one? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and no, it would not restrict any agencies or programs or providers more. The providers would still be following the income levels and the funding source eligibility requirements. Those aren't changing. We're just standardizing that when someone comes in, they will receive case management services, and here is how we as a community believe case management services as a best practice should happen. Here's, just kind of streamlining and solidifying how to work through the paperwork that is already provided by OHCS. So not limiting anything in any way.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Kim?
No questions, just a comment. Well done. It's very well laid out, very thoughtful.
Thank you, Kim.
And Sherry? Nope, we might have lost her again. Okay. While Sherry's might be unmuting herself. Sheila, any questions?
No, thank you for asking.
And Wakan, any questions?
No questions. Looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we get Sherry back?
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, and with that, Commissioner Farr, thank you.
I have a single question in 12 parts.
Okay.
No, I don't. No, I'm just looking at the document, and it's very well organized, very well done. And looking at the tables, a lot of work goes into this, clearly. And it comes to us in a short presentation. And I just want to acknowledge the amount of work that went into this very professional, very well done document. Thank you.
All right, and with that, can I get a motion to, thank you, Matthias. A second?
I'll second.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Councilor Benson.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to skip the discussion part because I feel like we just had the discussion. All right. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, it passes.
Thank you.
Oh, where am I? That's what the cost, we are now on the HMIS cost sharing policy.
Yes. to do my own slides, actually, if that's okay with you. I can't give up the reins. Also, I added some slides last minute, so I'm sorry they're not in the packet.
I see Kate Budd just joined us. Hi, Kate.
Okay, we'll test and see if I did this correctly. All right. So I'm here to talk to you today about a proposed HMIS cost sharing policy. And wanted to start first with the objectives, or like my primary lens when thinking about how to move this forward and what decisions to make. So first, the primary goal is that we have HMIS participation from as many local projects as possible. Some folks are very small, grassroots, doing incredible work. They have no grant money to do so, and we'd still love to see what they're doing and to have them participate. At the same time, we need to have quality, usable data from those providers. Provide enough technical support for our participating providers and their staff to actually do the work that we're asking them to do. The data standards manual that HUD puts out is over 200 pages long. So interpreting that, understanding how it works for your specific program, it also changes every 1 to 2 years, so understanding those changes and how those are implemented. We also use a software that is not popular and tricky to use, so teaching folks how to use that as well. Combining all those things and making sure folks can do the things we're asking them to do. And also, to not create a new part-time job for someone in determining how much to charge folks. Because that is, for some organizations and HMIS leads, that is part of how they're set up. So I would like that to not be someone's part-time job and to make this as minimal as possible. If we lose money collecting money, that doesn't make any sense. I have a full list of programs right at the end, and that's what's not in your packet. But just wanted to start by explaining the primary goal of this policy, or the main statement, is that we would expect any project that is an HMIS whose funder requires that they be an HMIS contribute some of that money towards HMIS. And almost everyone already does this, because most folks either pass through Lane County, primarily through state funding. A lot of that passes through the county first, and we take an admin portion. A portion of that funding we dedicate towards HMIS costs. Or if you're COC funded, the COC funds an HMIS project. We also have housing projects. We don't want to take money that we already paid for, like there's already a dedicated portion for that purpose. There are a few funding sources currently who require their projects to participate in HMIS. But some of those projects, if they're not also funded with another source, are not contributing in any way to our costs.
Is that an opportunity for us?
That's what today is about, yes. So these are our specific sources as of today. As you know, they change all the time. Sponsors used to have an amazing, huge PSH project that HUD funded directly that closed last year. So that was originally in this policy and we had to remove, for example. OHCS funds the Affordable Rental Housing Program. We have a few federal sources as well. Runaway and Homeless Youth, the Veteran Administration, Supportive Services for Veteran Families, and projects assisting the transition to homelessness, I think. We may see other things come up and drop off. For example, Oregon DHS funds a program for youth experiencing homelessness. They used to require HMIS, but recently have put a pause on that. We could have a data security conversation, but I think that's really to do with a lot of the concerns and lawsuits you're seeing between the federal government and the states around SNAP and WIC and that type of data sharing. That falls in the DHS realm. It doesn't fall in the OHCS realm. So there's just some sort of pauses right now. Some of those providers have stayed in HMIS and others are waiting. We do expect them to come back. But right now, they're not required to participate in HMIS. So I wanted to talk a little bit about budget. I did not prepare like a full financial analysis, nor do we really have the fiscal staff support to do that right now. But of our revenue or the things that pay for HMIS currently, about half of our funding comes from the continuum of care. So we can use that money fairly flexibly. Certainly, it needs to support all of the projects that are COC funded. We can also use it for general HMIS support. There's also a lot of funding requirements that we have as a continuum of care and an HMIS lead that this helps to support, but it only supports about half of our budget. So another component is taking that admin cut that I talked about. Part of pass-through funds, a portion of that money is dedicated towards programs and HMIS, but we only use that money to support the programs that funds. So if you're funded by SHAP, we're not going to use SHAP money to then pay for HMIS costs for someone else. It's just for that SHAP program. To fill the gap that remains, which fluctuates year to year and cannot tell you what that will be in July, we have used Lane County funds to cover that. General fund is certainly part of that. Currently, those other federal funders that I talked about, and when OHCS chooses to fund projects outside of HSD, there used to be a lot of those, now there's a handful. We don't receive any money for those programs. So there is a gap. It does fluctuate from time to time. In the time where we had a lot of COVID funds, and so we had a lot of programs, some of these things were a little bit easier to cover than they are now. Certainly exploring strategies for next year around how to contain some of those costs, but I don't want to quite go there today. More want to talk about the programs that we do have and what they're contributing currently. This is not a surprise to anyone who's a provider. Especially since 2020, we've seen a huge change in what is expected from data support for programs. Very much there's an expectation that there will be real-time information, that it will be accurate, and that it will, essentially, funders are more interested in analytics than they used to be. They want to know outcomes, they want to know specific numbers, questions that are very important and we certainly want to answer, but take a lot of time to do. So rather than once a year, let's pull something and put it together and send it out, really the data has to be clean all of the time. We've also seen as our system has grown, the types of issues that have changed have popped up, and Brianna referred to one of those actually today. The more shelters and the more PSH and the more HP programs we have, the more we find duplication of benefits or more questions. HUD is very specific about, for example, you can't have a person residing in 2 residential programs at the same time. Now motel voucher programs have to say, let me check HMIS first and see if you have a shelter bed, because if you do, you may not be eligible for this other thing. That also means that the shelter program needs to have their data up to date. So it's all of that types of support and understanding and checking for all of those things and helping providers understand that. That has made things a bit more complicated as well. In 2021, this is my second year here, we did a satisfaction survey, which we try to do each year. And in that year specifically, which makes sense because of our COVID demands at that time, we heard very strongly from providers, you guys have made some changes that have been really helpful. Your staff is growing and we're getting more support than we used to, but this is not enough. We cannot do the things you're asking us to do with the constraints that we have, and you need to provide us with more help. So there's a lot of things that we've done in that arena and invested a lot of time around training support specifically, and also more proactive review of programs for their data quality, and then reaching out to folks and saying, I don't think this makes sense. Maybe it does. Can you tell me some more about this? And here's how to help fix those errors or issues that we're encountering. That type of work is costly. Just like wanted to say that staff time and those extra investments that we've made. Certainly, I think the providers are feeling that and the amount of staff time they're having to spend on this work, but we're seeing that on the other side as well. Like I said, the outcome-focused reporting, while it's super important, the requirements put on the providers and then for us to support them as well. It just takes more. I did not include a timeline of all of the policy development, and I'm hearing perhaps that would be helpful, but just wanted to say a couple things about that. First is that I did email the providers who would have been affected at that time, given those funding sources, in February of 2025, to say, hey, this is something we've been thinking about. We contracted with Lisa Stewart, our former HMIS supervisor, to come as extra help for a while to help us work on this policy, and did a real deep dive on what other communities are doing and how that would work.
So it's at that time, I sent folks an email to say, this is what we're thinking right now. Don't have a firm date. Here's a survey you can fill out to provide us with feedback about how you're feeling about that, or you're welcome to reach out to me directly. I heard some feedback, then I had a baby. And so Kate Budd and Melissa Coloma took that feedback in the meantime, and then presented to the MAC group, having incorporated that feedback into a draft policy in the fall to look at a larger set of providers, not just the ones who would be paying, to say, like, what do you think? Does this make sense? Was able to add a lot more clarity and fix my wording in the policy that is in the packet today. And then this is our next step. But to come back to that, what are our options? How could we charge money? How are other people doing it? I wanted to talk about the options we considered and that I ruled out and why. A really common method is to pay per user. We used to limit the number of licenses that each provider could have, so folks who've been around for a long time probably remember those times. There are some concerns about doing that. One is that folks tend to share licenses when that happens. More and more, we've had security issues that we need to support. It's very important to know when this person logged in, it's legally tied to them. And we've had situations where we really need to act on that. So it's important that we do not share licenses when it comes to HMIS. It also disincentivizes data use sometimes. It becomes a barrier to people participating, which we don't want. When really the license costs are smaller in comparison to the full software cost as well as the staffing cost to support that. It would also require that we know who works on which projects at any given time. And perhaps one day we could have a conversation about the staff. I think we at HMIS get a pretty good idea of how much turnover we see from the providers. So last year we had 385 licenses held by 595 people. So that turnover is very significant. We see folks moving and changing all the time. That's just folks who changed their jobs and didn't need HMIS anymore. See a lot of project movement throughout the year. That truly, I think, would be a full-time job to keep up with folks. Mm-hmm. We could do what I lovingly call the Spirit Airlines model, where we pay per item, truly per item. And I've seen some providers do this. You have someone who needs retraining, that's $50, please. We had to delete something and you're coming back, that's a $100 charge. That sort of model, I don't like. One, we would have to charge year round, but also it really discourages people from reaching out and asking for things, or they put them off for a long time, or we just had a really hard time filling this position, case managers really struggle. Now we spent $400 on training costs that we didn't even use. That's not, I think, a useful model for some of our programs. Another common version is the grant percentage, where each agency would send in, here's my grant, here's the amount. Often this is a 1% to 3% charge that HMIS would take. We could do that and then keep track of everyone's grant year, when it's due, how much it is, what that percentage is. That becomes I don't know that providers want to do that for us. It's also a significant amount of work for the management of that. So those are the things that I had ruled out to come up with the pay-per-project model. A couple of reasons for that. I'm trying to do the short version of this. HMIS is both a database full of people and it's a database full of projects, and we have to manage both. A lot of the things that we do on the system administration end and the reporting end is on the actual project itself. What years was it open? What was the inventory? When did the inventory change? What is your federal grant identifier? What population do you serve? There's probably 40 to 50 questions on that end. Setting up the project, what types of questions are involved in that, and then some other issues related to security, who should be able to see this project, how do we report on that project, and then how are we reviewing the data quality for that project. For that reason, a lot of the costs that we incur aren't specific to how many people it serves, but rather just that the project exists at all. So what I am proposing, and borrowed this model from somebody else, I think in Texas, is that we would charge a flat amount just for the project existing in our system each year. And then based on how many average clients that project sees per quarter, we may increase that amount. That somewhat correlates with users, not perfectly,
but it certainly correlates with the data quality time that's spent on a project. If you see 10 people in a year, we're not spending as much time likely as if you see 1,000 people in a year. So this is the proposal. It looks slightly different from the draft I sent to providers because I made one less row and just sort of collapsed it all together. But that the total project cost would be somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. I should say as well, the way I came up with this maximum amount was to review the admin cut that HSD currently takes and uses towards different projects that we already do the pass-through funds for, and to make sure that these projects would not be paying more. That was really important. We want to have some contribution towards the cost, knowing it's not going to fully cover those, but trying to get somewhere that's a little bit more equitable. So between $2,000 and $4,000, depending on how many average individuals they see in a quarter, because that's closer to how much data quality we spend on those projects. That this year is a little bit different because I'm late. It's February already. But that each February we would contact providers, say, hey, last federal year, this is what we saw from your program. We estimate this amount for your project, and then offer the option of applying for a contribution waiver for folks to say, like, I can't do this and here's why. This year, I would expect many people to say, I can't do this. It's been tricky to find a time of year where folks can get this into their grant application for next year. And that was part of the intention in reaching out to people last year. I've heard from quite a few people, like, I'd like to know an amount because I'm working on a budget. But also because we have such a weird combination of funding sources in this little group that doesn't pass through us, there's a lot of different grant years to account for. So trying to look forward while still, trying to find that medium ground. Is this an allowable cost? What's your program budget? If this is a really significant percentage of your program budget, that would be helpful to know. And then what portion are you unable to pay? Maybe you can pay half, but not the full. What are plans for next year? And I think getting feedback in this way would also help us to understand, does this make sense for people? I have not seen the grant agreements or the program models for these specific programs because they don't pass through me. I've just seen the reporting requirements that I have to provide for them. So I definitely don't have full detail on what these projects are. Here's a list of what those providers are. Mostly these are federal veteran-focused programs, and we have a handful of other ones. For a long time, OHCS had funded honestly like a large group of shelter providers that didn't pass through us at all. That was a tricky situation to sort of be that middle person and try to figure out what their requirements are when we, hadn't been part of that. I wouldn't be surprised to see that again, and so I think that's part of why this would be helpful. This is my last slide, but wanted to say as well, the primary feedback that I've heard from providers is that this is a challenge because they don't have money, and I completely appreciate that, as well as that it's difficult because they're required to use HMIS, and so they don't feel like they should have to pay for it. On the other hand, we are required to support them and don't receive any funding for doing so. A lot of times with those requirements come additional reporting requirements, different questions that they have to ask, and those types of things, and the requirement that we have to support those providers like we would anyone else. Getting a portion of the funds, I said that wrong, but sort of like getting some support financially for that work would be helpful. Some states do directly fund HMIS in the same way that the federal government has the HMIS project that they fund through the COC. Our state does not do that. I've heard that there's conversation that might make it into the legislature in the future. And I've talked to OHCS a few times over the last few years and said, like, we can't continue to do this. When it doesn't pass through us, this doesn't work. We don't get any money for doing this, and you add these requirements on top. I haven't seen anything come of that yet. And what I've heard from other folks too, in the metro area especially, is that they do charge providers currently. So I think there's this expectation that in the grant agreement it says data collection is an eligible cost and that folks are already using this as part of those eligible costs. In other communities, they are, and we just haven't gotten to the point until now where we needed to tap into that option. We just talked a lot.
We're kind of running out of room right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is important that we get a vote in on this, right? So
Ideally, it would be, and I understand if that's not possible.
what's your deadline? Because I have some questions I'd like to ask, but I can ask them after the vote. I think you can satisfy my questions, and it doesn't need to be done in the 5 minutes we have left. So, so that being said, I'm prepared to move forward with a vote, but I do have some questions regarding the return on the investment for the agencies. How can we demonstrate that? And you don't need to talk about that right now, so I'll turn it back to you, Chair. Excuse me.
What I wanted to do, because I wanted to make sure that before we have votes on things, that everybody actually has an opportunity to speak and ask questions or raise concerns. So I don't want to push the vote forward. If we can't, well, we have 4 minutes. So I'm throwing it out there to the board members of, we could do the round robin. We would probably run a few minutes late before we got to the vote, but if people can stay for 5 minutes or so to do that, we could actually go through, have the discussion so that people could ask questions or concerns, and then just try to move on to see if we can vote on it today. And I see, Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm at the beginning of the queue of discussion if you're ready to go there, and I appreciated the framing you just offered for our quick time today. My question, I think, is brief, and it connects back to what we heard in public comment regarding questions from providers about the opportunity to give feedback. And I appreciate this presentation from staff. It sounds like there was a very thoughtful process and care, but that touch point with providers is important. And so I'm just curious if that has happened, and if not, I would support a motion to postpone until the board is able to hear that feedback and understand how people who would be impacted by this decision, or providers who would be impacted by this decision, are able to be partners in the development of this change in policy.
Just briefly, I have spoken with pretty much every provider over email, Dev Northwest included, and we've had some conversation. The MAC group as well, like I'd taken it to that group, recognize that not everyone who's affected is part of that group. We didn't do a large open forum, and if that's a need, there's an agency administrator meeting for HMIS providers that happens next week, and I could take it to that group.
Thank you for that feedback. I think, as was observed by staff, it's always challenging when we have a circumstance, as often happens, where our partners in the community are required to rely on information in order to successfully pursue the funding that we hope they are successful receiving, and also our jurisdictions, our public agencies are responsible for providing that information, but not adequately supported in funding. Especially as needs have changed. And I really appreciate the comments that staff shared about the changes in the dynamic nature of the quality of this data and how it is needed, not just on an annual or quarterly basis, but the sort of continuous need for this data to be accessible and clean. I will be open to hearing other thoughts from this group about the decision to move forward with a vote today, or a decision to postpone and have more information come back to the board.
If we could postpone next month, which is the executive group, I would sure appreciate that, because Mayor, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about leverage that we potentially could have with OHCS, which wouldn't give us immediate results, but it would put it in the hopper. And we have local government advisory, which we speak directly with OHCS in the same room next Friday. So if, Mayor, you and I could talk about it in the meantime, so I could get support of the cities as we move forward to OHCS.
And I see from Alexa, she supports that we postpone. You do too, Mateus? Okay. Does anybody have any objections to postponing? Sorry. And does anybody have any specific questions or information they would like for Carly to bring back when she has the meeting next week. Go ahead, Jack.
I just was curious too about the potential of maybe a baseline fee per organization and then a lower per project fee. The nature of grant funding and always kind of needing to rename new projects and things like that, it just creates a disincentive, I think. And so, I see names on here multiple times. So maybe there's a $1,000 you're in here fee, and then it's $300 a project or something, and then that scales. Just because I know it just seems hard to watch a place that is serving 40 people have to pay so much.
Go ahead, Jack. Thank you.
Actually, Genevieve kind of took exactly what I was going to say, so thank you and well said. I think we work a lot with HMIS. We love HMIS. We recognize that this is a rock and a hard place situation, but with SVDP, we have a program with 5 people that are enrolled that's 2,000 that actually could become a prohibitive.
Yeah, and that's brand new, right? Like
Right.
that's your pilot. And so
Right.
I think like that's been what's been difficult too, is that dynamic. But that's where there are other communities that do it that way too. So I can look more into that too.
And what we were going to vouch for was a per agency with like add-on prices, because our 2 biggest ones combined are about 300, and those fit into the budget just fine. But our smaller ones were hard.
Thank you. Mayor Knudsen, did you have other? Oh, she's just on a new device. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. No, my only comment was to your question that I think the type of information that Genevieve alluded to, it would be interesting to know from providers if they have other thoughts about ways in which this shift could be more gracefully implemented and not a barrier to use, but also providing some certainty over time about what funding would be coming from this change into HMIS in the county. So it's another reinforcement for asking some of those questions and bringing that back.
Thank you. And so, because I know we're on a time frame and we have to wrap up, but I want to make sure really quick that Carly announces the date and the time of that meeting next week so that everybody that is involved will have it on their calendar to come in and be a part of the conversation.
Yes, it is February 26th at 1 p.m. That's typically for HMIS providers. So each of those agencies has at least one agency admin who gets the invite to that meeting. I'll make sure this gets added to the agenda. We're also talking about the PIT count, so it should be exciting.
Thank you. And I appreciate you, Leilani, for sitting there very patiently, and she has agreed to come back next month because we thought we might not have enough time to talk about the CHIP plan. Wait a minute. Brianna, can we move the community health? Okay. Thank you. All right. And then Brianna will do an email update of the community needs assessment update. So look for that, board members, to be coming out. And then we don't have time for the questions, follow-up questions, but hopefully, I know, and everybody really just started meeting, right? The new subcommittees?
Yeah, we had all of the new committees have their first meetings either end of January or first week in February, so I'd be happy to provide an update regarding those meetings at the next meeting in March.
Okay.
And then the reports from the existing committees are in the packet as well.
Yes. All right. So you can look at what they've done in the past 60 days, or, well, less than that, really, because it was just January, but James will give an update, and we'll make sure that's on the agenda for the March meeting as well. All right. And so with that, we're going to adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we will see you at the executive meeting, some of you in March. Good afternoon.